Forgive me for being exactly who I am.
Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Breitlings. I'm Pete McConville. Actually, the name of the channel is Not So Obvious Watches, but I've become very sensitive to the fact I've been talking about Breitlings a lot, and then I've done another video about Breitlings, and that's kind of pushed me over the edge. I promise I won't talk about, screw it. It's my channel and I'll talk about what I want. So I'll probably talk about Breitlings a bit. Okay, so that said, I don't think I'm upsetting the universe very much. Considering that Breitling is one of the biggest brands in the world, it actually gets remarkably little coverage. I reckon you could find more videos around the latest Spinnaker release than you could around most Breitling Avengers or Premier chronographs. So I think this is probably no bad thing that I tend to talk about them. Okay, so that said, what's brought me here? Scottish Watches, great guys, go check out their website. They run a Facebook page, of which I am a moderator. It's a group actually, and it's a really fun place to hang out, and they do a lot of fun discussions, and if you act like a dick you get booted, so it's actually kind of a nice place to play. But coming up to the end of last year, well, coming up to the end of this year, if I get this video out still in 2019, they ran a poll on what was the most clockbait-like brand. By being like clockbait, it meant out of focus and not knowing where their autofocus button was. Now, the clear winner in that was Breitling, which caught me completely by surprise, because as someone who follows the brand, I sort of thought that they were probably the single most focused brand in the watch world right now. What they have done over the last 2 years to their brand in really sharpening up their vision of who they are and getting that out has been really quite incredible to watch. And so to see that sort of the result where people felt that they were an unfocused brand, as I said, completely put me back on my heels and made me think about stuff. The first point is most people that answered that poll probably know next to nothing about Breitling and are mostly responding on gut feel, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a crime. This is a hobby, and most of us do proceed on our gut for most things. I run a YouTube channel, which means I tend to think about things a little bit more, but that's because I run a YouTube channel.
I've come to the conclusion that my guts have shit for brains.
It's kind of my job to do that. So what I thought was I would use my YouTube channel to pass on some things about Breitling, looking at why might people that don't watch the brand think it's a bit unfocused at the moment, and why you're wrong. So why might people think that Breitling's a bit unfocused? I think there's a couple of reasons. One, there's a lot of unhappiness about Breitling losing the wings off the Breitling B. Two, there's a lot of feeling that George Kern is a person that makes changes, and that George Kern is a person that makes changes willy-nilly with no great strategic thought, and that a lot of people blame him for things that seem to have gone wrong at IWC. Now, I don't follow IWC, so I don't know what has happened during his tenure there, so I'm not even going to talk about that. And I think the last thing is, a lot of people would say that Breitling has too many big garish watches at a time when big garish watches are no longer the thing, that Breitling are sort of too focused on old-fashioned kind of ways of advertising with things like John Travolta, that their new advertising doesn't seem to make any sense, and that the last thing is that Breitling just has too many SKUs, too big a range. They're all over the place. I'm going to address some of those. A couple of those I can't talk about, but I'll address some of those and instead talk about what Breitling is doing, and you might want to have a look at if you've dismissed the brand for any of those reasons. So let's start with the Breitling B. Okay, so Breitling began life as a manufacturer back in 1884, making a wide variety of high precision, high accuracy watches. That's what they did. They made a whole bunch of things, from chronographs to chronometers, always stretching technical boundaries. In the 1950s, they got involved in aviation a little bit more. They came out with the iconic Navitimer, and they added the wings to the Breitling B of the Navitimer in the 50s. So after the brand had been around for like 75, 80 years, they added the wings to one model in their brand. Because that was successful, you could argue that's when they lost focus. During the 50s to the 70s, they progressively added those wings to more and more brands, to more and more lines within their brand. They progressively became more and more identified with one small part of what had been a wide-ranging watch brand, so that by the 70s and the 80s they were widely known as the Navitimer brand, and they were widely known as being aviation inspired, and that was about it. The move that Breitling's made to go back to what they were, which is a maker of high precision, high quality chronometer grade watches across land, sea and air, isn't a loss of focus. It's a return to what Breitling has been in the past. It's a return to what made Breitling great, and a cast off of the limitations that probably drove a lot of the misconceptions that people have in their heads now about Breitling. So far from being a loss of focus, giving up on the wings is actually a sign that Breitling has remembered who it really is and can be, and is casting off the shackles it had to one particular watch that was very successful for it back in the 1950s. As I said, a lot of people are sort of negative about the very fact that George Kern is in the chair now. I don't know why. I didn't follow what he did at IWC. I don't kind of get the hate, but it's there, so I can't comment on that. If you don't like Breitling purely because George Kern's in charge, well, all power to you. That's on you. So now let's talk about Breitling's kind of big garish watches that don't line up with the community expectations of 2019, 2020. Well, that's kind of, again, the Breitling of some years ago. Breitling has introduced, yes, they still have big 46mm watches. I think there's the odd 48 there somewhere. But a lot of those massive, great garish chronomats have all gone away. And now you've got, yes, 45, 46mm chronometers, but you've chronographs, but you've also got 38mm pilot's watches. You've got 36mm dive watches. There are watches that cover everything from the smallest size that most people would wear in 2019 through to the largest size. And there's quite often a fair bit in there for pretty much anyone who wants a Breitling watch. Which brings me to the next question of Breitling having too many watches, too many SKUs in their lineup. Actually, again, we'll come back to like the great George Kern cull of SKUs within the Breitling lineup over the last 2 years. If you haven't really been paying attention, you might have missed this. And because there's been so many, bear with me, I'll get some notes because I'll forget. So over the last 2 years, we've seen the Colts, the entire Colt range gone. We've seen all the men's Galactic range, all of those big flashy kind of things, gone. A few remnants in the strictly female line, but they're slowly chipping away too, so that now there's only about half a dozen watches in the entire Galactic range. All the ETA brand heritage divers, pretty much all of them gone. There's a few of the 77 chronos left, but all the basic three-hander ETA based movements are gone from the Ocean Heritage line. The Navitimer has been culled, so that the new Navitimer 8 line was moved out of the Navitimer line, put into its own creation, the Aviator line, and also culled. That Aviator line has lost a lot of its ETA 7750 watches out of it, is much more focused on the new Breitling B20 movement. And across both the Aviator and the Navitimer line, a lot of the SKUs in there have been culled, and I haven't been watching and downloading and keeping a track of the exact numbers, but I would guess probably a third of the Navitimer and Aviator lines that were there 2 years ago are now gone. There's less than 2/3 the number that was there a year or so ago. And yes, finally the old Avenger line has gone and replaced by a new version of the Avengers, and that Avenger line is again much smaller than the line it replaced. There's about as half as many SKUs in the new Avenger line as there was in the old one. So across the board, the plethora of choices that Breitling used to give you is by and large gone. It's now a much more focused, much more narrowly defined brand. Personally, I'm not sure how I feel about that, in that some of the watches that have gone, like the blacked out 7750 based Aviator 8, which I really liked. I liked that watch. I kind of thought I might like to buy it one day. Well, it's off the list now. It's gone. So a couple of months ago, almost a year ago, I did a video talking about, you know, the odd relationship we have with brands in terms of, as a consumer, I just want lots and lots of choices. But as a brand enthusiast, maybe I want less choices if it means the brand does better. And that's the exact position I'm in now. I kind of like Breitling. I kind of like to see them doing well. By the way, they are doing extremely well, growing very, very quickly. And over the last 2 years, probably enjoying some of their best returns that they've had in decades. But it's come at the cost of watches that I kind of liked. It's come at the cost of a whole bunch of watches I couldn't care less about and were gone. It means that subsequently those days of massive discounts on Breitlings may be limited. Maybe you have to start paying more for Breitlings in the future. How do I feel about that? I'm really conflicted. I feel a bit hypocritical. There's a little part of me that thinks I should be shaking my fist at George Kearns for making watches more expensive, harder to get, less options. But then on the same time, I kind of like the idea that he's taking a brand I've got some feeling for and making it more successful. So perhaps I'm getting a sense of why Rolex fanboys like the way that Rolex treats them. So that's really about it. That's all I was going to say about Breitling, and the fact that I think that they are really far more focused than people give them credit for. The problem is that no one really watches them carefully, and no one is really paying attention to the changes that have been made. I think if you do really pay attention, really take care to look at what they're doing, you might be quite impressed at how that ship, which was sinking, seems to have righted itself and is sailing in a fairly exciting direction right now. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. I apologise if I've been sweating up a storm. It is currently 42 degrees outside and my aircon is really struggling to deal with it. A bad day to be trying to film under the lights in this room. But I've just recently got my man cave back from my granddaughter, so I thought I'll squeeze out a quick video while I can. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, like it. If you dislike it, feel free to hit the dislike button, but please tell me why. It's always nice to get feedback in the comments below, even if it's negative. If you please hit the subscribe button, it really helps me out. Go check me out on Instagram. A card's going to come up with some details about that. You'll get to see what I wear more often and some other parts of my life. As far as a wristwatch check today, since I remembered it, I will do it. Today I'm wearing my Müller Glashütte M99 City. Probably the only watch I've got that I wear on a bracelet day in, day out. I really quite like this bracelet, and it's another one of those things where I find that my tastes are shifting once I get used to the idea of something I like, in this case a bracelet. Anyway, that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.